1:33, and I think they're slightly different, but I'm going to say 1:33 is our meeting time. I'm Liz Sheehan. I'm the chair of this committee for program performance and evaluation. Our first item on our agenda is to do our introduction. So we'll just go briefly around the room and just let us know who you are and kind of who you're representing today at the meeting. So Liz Sheehan, I am on the HPI board and I'm also a council member. I'll go this way.
I am Jeff Herron. Apparently now am homelessness prevention manager, but also for a few weeks still also grants manager with LFUCG.
I am Marissa Wild, and I'm the Continuum of Care Coordinator.
Hi, I'm Joy Andrade, and I'm on the HPI board.
I'm Bud Revlett on the HPI board.
My name is Donovan Ward. I'm the lieutenant over there in our downtown entertainment district.
My name is Jason Smith, and I'm one of the sergeants for the downtown entertainment district.
Bruce Davis with the HPI board.
Julie Joseph, Nomi Lexington.
Danielle Sanders with Community and Resident Services.
Christina Ellison, New Beginnings Bluegrass.
Renee Shepard, I'm on the HPI board.
Jackie Long, Mountain Comprehensive Care Center.
Okay, so today's meeting, we have our program reviews. We're still waiting on one presenter to get here, but typically we also have meeting minutes to approve. We haven't received the June meeting minutes quite yet, so we will have those at the next meeting to approve. So we'll do that vote at the next meeting. So then in our agenda, we have Community Action Council going first, but if you don't mind, Jackie, to go ahead and present, then we'll kind of skip ahead and come back. Jackie is here for Mountain Comprehensive Care Center, and you have two programs to present on. Let's do one at a time so we can get questions for each one. The first one that I have is the Permanent Supportive Housing Program.
Okay. So our Permanent Supportive Housing Program was originally the Lexington Housing First program. So that was funded by the city, not by the Continuum of Care. And that program served 10 of the highest utilizers in the system. And after 1 year, we became funded for permanent supportive housing through the Continuum of Care. And those people that were already housed transferred over into that program. We continue to serve people with some of the highest acuity in the system, with over half of the persons that we are currently serving scoring 13 to 15 on the VIASPID app. Of the original Housing First clients, we're still serving 7 households, so of the original 10. We are currently serving 15 households and have requested 3 additional referrals to replace persons who have moved out of our program. We applied for a modification of our grant last August. The modification was to reduce the household sizes in our grant while maintaining the same overall number of units, which is 18. This was because in the Lexington system, there's not very many homeless families, and we had several 2- and 3-bedroom units in this grant. Also, we moved the excess funds. We didn't change the grant amount. We moved the excess funds from rental assistance into supportive services because we only had one funded case manager, and that's not enough to adequately serve 18 households. So we now have a case manager and a community support associate, and had finally approved that modification in June. So it took almost a year.
Imagine that.
I know, but Heath is on the job now, we'll just say that. So we did finally get that, and we will have to do one more modification to get everything in line, but because of the grant inventory worksheets that have already been out. I think he changed it for the one that's currently, that we just sent in, that one's fixed, but there's going to be one grant year in between them.
Okay.
So we'll
Is there
have to
anything
fix
needed
that.
from us?
I don't think so. I think I just need to update it with Heath.
Okay.
So we should be good. So that's going to help us better spend our funds. The challenges that we have faced in the permanent supportive housing program are the same that everyone's finding right now. Finding available housing that will accept vouchers and accept people with background issues. Right now, we still have one person looking for housing. It's literally like the Hunger Games, because when you find someone's got a vacancy, 10 people have applied for it and scooped it up before you can even get there. We currently have one couple who just received an eviction notice, and they will likely be homeless before we can find another place for them. They were one of the original high utilizers also. This is the second time that they weren't evicted from their last apartment, but their lease was not renewed. So now they just got the eviction notice like yesterday. So we have another couple at that same complex that is likely going to be evicted any day. So we're struggling with finding places that will take people with behavioral problems, basically. They have, in both of these instances, there's a lot of mental illness involved too, so it's a challenge. Another challenge is getting people to participate in services so that they can remain housed. In this case, while they will interact and work with our housing staff, they don't necessarily want to take the step into further mental health and substance abuse treatment that would also give them medication and really help their behavior. So it's an ongoing, trying to get them to keep appointments, and we even provide transportation. We'll go pick them up to take them to the appointments, but they sometimes don't answer the door. Also, we've had a challenge lately with people destroying their apartments, and I just don't even know what. I've talked to other people in other programs. I don't know if the moon's not right. It's like literally come out of nowhere. And also, many landlords are not only not accepting vouchers, but they are raising rents above affordability limits. But we do have some successes. So as noted earlier, we have had 7 of the original Housing First clients remaining housing, and some have been evicted more than once, but they're all still in housing so far. Of the 15 households, we now have 7 actively participating in behavioral health services, and 1 recently requested to go to residential treatment for 30 days. That's a huge win. Most of the participation in services over the last year is a direct result of our case manager, who has really been working hard on moving them towards services, and it's starting to pay off. One of our high utilizer clients, who has been denied several times for Social Security, which is mostly because he goes at a physical health instead of mental health, because he kind of denies the mental health part. He actually, we referred him to the Bluegrass ad for their Transitions to Transformation program, and they got him a job at Goodwill where he can sit down, and he is thrilled beyond measure because he has a little money in his pocket now. So that was really a great outcome. And we have another one of our high utilizers who was chronically homeless for 15 years on the streets, and he has on and off, resisted treatment and resisted health treatment, and for physical health, and he had gotten down to like 78 pounds, and he has finally re-engaged with his physical health doctors and is getting procedures that are helping him eat, and he's gaining weight now, and he's so far hasn't had a lot. He's been evicted like 4 times. We've rehoused him a lot, but so far he is not causing problems and his main problem is just having too much company. It always gets him evicted, but he's finally settled down and not having people and telling people, no, you can't come over. So fingers crossed. I think we're having a really good outcome with him. And then another of the high utilizers just got her kids back. She does yell at my staff every single day, but she got her kids back and she got a job, so that's a really great outcome. So this grant period, we've had 2 households to increase their income. One has had their Social Security reinstated, and we have submitted 1 application for the Community Integration Supplement. For the upcoming year, to continue to increase, we're putting an emphasis on increasing income. We're going to continue to encourage those who may be able to work a part-time job to accept referrals to Transitions to Transformation. It's a really great program. And for persons who already have SSI, to apply for the Community Integration Supplement. And also, our entire housing staff is being trained in SOAR next month. And we'll start doing some SOAR applications for people who might not have their SSI. And side note, if anyone wants to get trained in SOAR, let me know, and I'll send you a link to the cohort, because I'm a SOAR lead, so we can train you.
If you want, we can send that out to our listserv.
Okay, we'll do that. Okay, I'm almost done. We've had 0 exits to homelessness during this grant period. We have 1 exit due to death and 1 to nursing home, and 1 to live with a family member. For increased housing stability, we have incorporated the use of the org code case management exercises for each client, and we are implementing the full SPDAT as a case management tool as recommended by org code. And we have hired a CSA who is actively working with clients to provide ADLs assistance. That's it.
Thank you. What questions do we have for Jackie about the permanent supportive housing program?
Questions?
Go ahead, Beth.
So my questions are mainly about the evictions that, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, or about the evictions the clients keep facing. Is it, you said for the one individual, it's mostly they have too much company, and then what's causing it in other situations? Is it like a case-by-case thing?
It's case by case.
Yeah.
And the one couple that just got their eviction notice, I don't really buy some of what the landlord's saying, but I can't prove it. He said that he keeps saying that they keep unplugging an air conditioning unit that's flooding other apartments. But I really think that it's another issue in the building that's coming from above their apartment, and we just can't prove it. And we of course can't get in those other apartments to see where it's really coming from. And we offered to help pay for the damages, and the invoice he sent us was completely ridiculous, and I refused to pay it. And so that's probably part of it, is because I'm not going to let him. We don't have the money to pay for what he was asking us to pay for. And then he put on the eviction notice that there was a bunch of noise complaints from neighbors. So I don't know about that. The truth of it is, in this housing placement, they've been doing much better than they were in the last one. The last housing placement, the problem was hoarding, and it was the general condition of the apartment. And this one, it's like night and day compared to what they were doing before. But we had to put them in this particular placement because of backgrounds. It's very limited where they can go. And I just think that they have, that the landlord doesn't like them, and just found a way to evict them this time. I can't prove it. That's the problem. But most of the time, the issues come from visitors. And so the other person that I expect to get an eviction notice, he's got visitors. I think the police are there a lot too, though. And it's the behavior, and that particular person, when he was in the shelter system, actually was banned from the shelters and then banned from the hotel because of disruption. So it's mainly behaviors.
Yeah. And I assume in the cases containing too many visitors, it's in the lease that they're not allowed to have.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Have you all, and I know, it's often not wise to try to take it to court, and it's easier to just let them move. But have you all, like in the situation where it sounds like they're making unsubstantiated claims, have you like tried to talk to legal lawyers or any lawyers?
Well, we'll go to court with them.
Okay.
And we always go to court with them. And
Yeah.
so we usually get an extension of like 30 days
Okay.
to try to find another place for them. But
Yeah.
rarely does the judge say, no, you can stay. So it's really, really hard. And then, so we're talking about like one of the people, I think that yes, but that's 15. And one, and the other's like, no, one's 13, and one is 13. So, and 14. So, yeah, they're very, very high. And it's really hard to keep them housed, and there's not enough places to put them. So, and like some of the go-tos, like, have stopped taking vouchers at all. I don't really understand that.
So I have two questions. First one, you guys, rental assistance or lease, and I believe you're rental assistance? Okay, so then you would have the ability to pay above FMR as long as it's within rent reasonableness, correct? Okay, so that demonstrates that they even have the ability to go above what some programs like New Beginnings as leasing can only do FMR, so their challenges are even greater when FMR is below that value.
Yeah, definitely.
Fair market rent value. And so most of our programs, if they are leasing, they are bound to that value, and traditionally those are usually higher than rent reasonableness. With rent reasonableness, what the organization has to establish is that there are comparable units in that neighborhood that are unassisted that would be higher than the rent that they are trying to establish for the assisted unit. I just wanted to know that because I'm still working with HUD to try to pursue waivers to allow our COC programs that use leasing dollars to go above their FMR. We are now on our second request. Each time we have either been denied or requested for additional information, so we're continuing to work with New Vista and New Beginnings to try to get them that flexibility. But even if we are successful, it's going to be a short-term solution. It will only carry them through, I think, the end of March of 2023 that they would have that flexibility. If they are able to lease the unit before that date, then they can carry it through the end of the lease term, paying above that FMR value. But it's definitely a struggle that we're having community-wide. HUD seems to acknowledge it by offering the waivers, however, not so easy to obtain them.
Exactly. Yeah, so that email that, I think you were copied on it the other day, where HUD had questions about my waiver request. Right after I sent that, I got another call that Modern Property Management had told us that a bunch of the landlords that they manage for are not going to take vouchers anymore. They still have some, but a bunch of them just decided not to take vouchers anymore too. So that wasn't even in that. I'd already hit send.
And in the process of preparing our requests for those waivers, I pulled some data on our length of time that individuals remain homeless between project enrollment and housing move-in. I pulled those over 3 different annual periods. That would have been 7/1 of 2019 through 6/30 of 2020, and then the same time frame for the next 2 years. What I was trying to look at was if that length of time varied from pre-pandemic, during the pandemic, and where we are now. And we were seeing exponential increases. When I'm saying increases, I pulled the data by our ESG recipients, by our COC recipients, being different funding sources, and then combined and across the board there were increases. Sometimes we're talking about increases as much of 300% that length of time increased. And a lot of that, I have to believe, is due to the identification of affordable housing units. So I'll probably put that on the agenda for our next data and systems integration meeting, because I think it definitely demonstrates and helps us better understand the challenges. We still need to work on what we do to solve it, but I think we really just need to look at that data as a group and understand just how much it's impacted our system performance. The other question that I had was around, you mentioned property damage being something that you're dealing with recently. I know in the past we've had discussions as a COC about doing landlord mitigation programs that might make funds available to do things like help to cover damages. And at the time that we initially had those conversations, it didn't really seem like a lot of the agencies actually had cases of property damage, and if they did, it was typically minimal. But just wondering, when you have those cases now, what kind of ballpark dollar figures are we talking about? Are we talking minor damage, extensive damage?
$3,000 to $5,000. And like I said, I think that when we say, well, send us an inventory of the damages and the cost of repair, and we'll see what we can do. We can at least send them, I think, the equivalent of one deposit. What the regs say. Excuse me. But then we get it, and it'll have, $300 an hour to paint and stuff like that, and it's way inflated. They're probably inflated by 50%. It's still a lot of damage, though. And then I think sometimes, like one in particular, he evicted the client, and I will not dispute that the client probably threw garbage all over the apartment on his way out, but I don't think he did the damages that they say that he did. And I think that he was evicted because of his company, and I think that once he was evicted, his company came in. I have a big problem with people having company come in, like when they're not there, and destroying it. And I think that that's what happens. The landlord did not secure the property, and then there were people that entered it, and he's blaming it on our client.
Bruce?
Check on, make sure I understood you. You said a landlord or someone was willing to charge $300 an hour for painting.
Yeah.
I think anybody who's ever rented, if you look at your lease agreement, usually you're given some kind of information about those costs and an addendum or somewhere, and it's always astronomical.
Yeah.
Like if they install a $20 set of blinds, they're going to charge you $50 or $100 for that set of blinds. It's not uncommon just in the rental market in general.
Yeah, and then like they'll charge you like $300 for an hour for painting and not charge you for the supplies, but it doesn't add up. So it's really crazy. And I wonder if it's like that in all of their leases or just the leases that they're given for people with vouchers. I don't know.
That would be interesting because obviously if we had any indication, that would be discrimination.
Okay, there's one more question.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's a question for you or a question in general. It's about the fair market rents. How often is that standard updated? And I think
Annually in October.
in October, rents have increased 14% year over year.
Yeah,
in
I bet they
Lexington.
won't. They won't
So like that would lag
increase that.
substantially behind what.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
really frustrating.
Lexington for a one-bedroom apartment fair market rent is $741. That takes into consideration utilities.
Yes. Any fair market rent always, if it's not included in the lease, would also include the portion of utilities that a client is responsible for. We're also given a rent calculation or a utility calculation sheet, and we have to use those values, which may be potentially above or below what the actual utilities run for the unit. Keep in mind, some of the units that we have access to may be older or not well maintained at times, so their utility bills may be much higher. So that also creates potential problems of either a participant or a program having costs that aren't factored into the rent values that HUD tells us.
It's insane. It really is.
Any other questions about this program? Chris, do you want to introduce yourself real quick since we already did the introductions?
Yeah, Chris Clark, Community Action Council, HPI Board.
Kelsey Morris from the Drop-In Center, New Vista.
The other program that we're evaluating from Mountain Comprehensive Care is the rapid rehousing program. So, go ahead.
Okay, so our rapid rehousing program is fairly new. This is just the second year of it. And it provides rapid rehousing services for 11 households. And currently in our second year, and we started this program out really strong, and then we had some case management, staffing issues actually. So we've been through a couple of, especially last year, through a couple of case managers, but we have, our current case manager has been with us probably about 8 months now. So it's a much more stable program, and everyone is doing well in it. We've served 15 households to date, 16 adults and 5 children. And of the 4 exits, we had 1 exit to jail for more than 90 days, but he's out and now stably housed, but not with our money. 1 voluntarily left the program. HMIS does show that they are back in the system in the balance of state. And 2 exited because they found a job at a salary where the 30% of their income exceeded the rental assistance. So they're doing very well. 10 of the households served are chronically homeless, which is, I would say, unusual usually for rapid rehousing. So that's a large number of chronically homeless for this. Our average VI-SPDAT score is 7. Rapid rehousing is 4 to 9 on the VI-SPDAT, so we're squarely at 7. Most of our clients are finishing up their first year now in the program, and we'll need another year. For this grant year, we've had 2 negative exits, and only 1 of those ended up back in the homelessness system. Of 15 households served, 13 have moved into housing, 2 are still looking, and 1 had disappeared and was exited before finding housing. I was looking through our HMIS at our health indicators, because I think that really does impact performance. We're serving 5 of our folks have mental health disorder, 6 have an alcohol disorder, 1 has drug use disorder, 2 have both alcohol and drugs, 2 have chronic health conditions, 1 has HIV/AIDS, 1 has a developmental disability, which I will say that is the one who's exited and ended up back in the system, and I'll talk about that a little more, my thoughts about the VI-SPDAT on that, but that was a direct impact. The developmental disability was a direct impact on her leaving the program. And 3 have a physical disability. And we have 2 who are actively fleeing domestic violence. We've had 2 exits with income. We have 2 current participants who have increased their income. And we have 2 who are working actively with job programs. I have 3 who I have concerns about maintaining their lease at the end of the program. And we're working to find some kind of permanent voucher for those people. We have 4 people who we're working on a community integration supplement with, and realistically, probably 2 of those would be approved. Our challenges are mainly the same as with permanent supportive housing. We are finding available housing that will take a voucher, and background issues, getting people to participate in services, although this particular population sometimes isn't quite as hard as the permanent supportive housing. And many landlords are raising rents above affordability limits. And I even had a note here, even with the rent reasonableness, this is a concern because folks need to be able to maintain their lease in a relatively short time. So it really impacts rapid rehousing. Getting people to agree to access job services has been an issue. Even though, we say this is a time-limited program, we got to get you some income, it's really hard to get them to follow through. And we do provide transportation, so that's not an issue. And then the other biggie is that VI-SPDAT scores, and we've discussed this a million times, VI-SPDAT scores are not always accurate. So they might score for rapid rehousing, but really they're probably a permanent supportive housing client. So, we've talked about it a lot. It's hard to get people to be truthful on the VI-SPDAT. They don't want to admit to, mental illness and things like that, or drug use. So, and we probably have at least 4 of the referrals were probably better suited for permanent supportive housing. Over the short life of the program, 3 persons from the beginning of the program have gotten jobs that pay well, and they've moved on from the program. We also have clients actively accessing the Transitions to Transformation program and OWL, the Opportunities for Work and Learning. We have a couple doing that too. One in particular doing the T2T program has an SMI, and he's one that I've been concerned about maintaining his housing, but he's actively working with that program. They haven't found him a job yet, but they're working to find something that would be suited with his SMI. He was probably another one that was a permanent supportive housing kind of person. But we're working with him on SSI. But he'll still, even if he gets a part-time job, he would still be able to get the SSI. So we're trying to do that. And then we've got a couple of people we're also, trying to do the community integration supplement. But when they don't have SSI, it's a little more challenging to get that.
Thank you. Questions about the rapid rehousing program?
You mentioned that VI-SPDAT sometimes underscores. Does it ever overscore?
I've never seen it overscore. I don't think I've ever seen somebody. I have seen people who in the moment, it probably scored it accurately in that moment, but then advanced once they were in stable housing, were able to get it together. But I don't think I've ever seen it just overscore someone that obviously is trying to get the system or anything like that.
And we just don't have, do we not have flexibility in the regulations around placement from the scores to RRH or permanent supportive housing?
We do. We can do a full SPDAT, but usually it's like we get the referral and then we don't. Here's the other problem. So we get the referral and then it's like, we're working with them and then we're like, oh, they probably should be in permanent supportive housing. But if you put them back in permanent supportive, for a permanent supportive housing referral, there's probably more rapid rehousing resources available. So then you're putting them back into homelessness. So kind of just like go, okay, let's just work with them and see if in 2 years we can find a permanent solution for them.
Yeah, so a couple things that I'll just kind of share. I know we got a mixed group and I want to make sure everyone follows. The VI-SPDAT tool is primarily a self-report tool. So as we go through, we question individuals about their situation and try to determine what their acuity and needs would be. We have to acknowledge that to a certain extent, it tends to usually trend that the score is lower than what is maybe the actual needs of the client. And a lot of that has to do with not wanting to acknowledge certain challenges that an individual might have, not having self-awareness. But also, some of the questions that we're asking are very personal, very intimate in their nature, and they may not be things with the limited kind of relationship that they have with the service provider to fully disclose. We do have a process, as Jackie mentioned, that would allow us to do a full SPDAT assessment. That tool would be more comprehensive and also allows a little bit greater input from the assessor, whereas the VI-SPDAT, I'm really supposed to record your response whether I have other knowledge of you or not, because it's what you are presenting to me and it's a self-report tool. To kind of combat this to some extent and also to work on the equity of our system, we have recently made some changes to our assessment where our continuum is adding some additional criteria where we're acknowledging that, for example, the location in which someone is sleeping in, if someone's unsheltered, that would score them some additional points to reflect a higher acuity, but also things like those that might be of certain minority groups might have more challenges in being able to permanently house themselves, or might have additional risks of safety during the time that they're experiencing homelessness. So we've taken some steps, but it's not necessarily foolproof. There's still possibilities, and we've only recently implemented those, so we don't really have a lot of data at this point to demonstrate whether that's been effective in adjusting acuity to better reflect reality.
And I think, personally, I think that part of doing a VI spit out also is the understanding of the person you're doing it with. I don't know how many times that I've asked a question and they don't really understand what it means, or they don't exactly understand what it means. And I mean, there's a question on there about like HIV or AIDS, whether you would live, and that's the worst worded question, because everybody thinks you're asking them if they're, if they have that, disease or whatever, and that's not what it's asking. So I mean, there's the way that some of that stuff is worded is way off. And like I said, I think a lot of people just don't understand. It could be a simple question, and I think some people just don't, get what it's actually trying to say. So I think the wording is some of it's off, because I'm going to not go against what Jeff just said, but like when I do VI spedats, I explain things a lot more. And I've seen a lot of workers just go through there, they read word for word exactly what it says, and then when you answer that question, that's the way they record it. And I understand it's a self-reporting tool, but I want to make sure that they understand what the question means. Because just because it's asked in one kind of way doesn't mean that that's the way they're going to answer, because they might not understand it.
So my guidance to anybody that would be in that role of doing the assessment would be, we start with the language, but you should also open that, and part of our opening script, we should be acknowledging to the client that if you have difficulties understanding, it's okay to ask clarifying questions. You can try after that initial presentation of the question to rephrase if you can tell that the client is struggling or expresses that they're struggling. It's the start, but definitely don't feel like you can't provide clarification. We definitely want to realize that not everyone is necessarily going to be operating at the same capacity or have the same experiences, and so they might interpret things differently. If they're expressing a need for clarification, that is more than acceptable.
Okay. Yeah, and then one other point on the overscoring part or whatever, I actually do see people overscore. And the reason that I do is because honestly, it depends on how well they know the system. If I ever have to do if I ever go back into homelessness or whatever, when somebody comes up to me and wants to do a VI spit, I know exactly how to answer those questions. And some people who's been in and out of the system for long periods of time, they know how to answer those questions. They've heard them before. They've heard talk amongst other people. They've been in programs before. They know how it works. So, I mean, you can set yourself up for whatever score you want if you know how to. And I'm just pointing that out. I'm sure anybody who does these VIs know
Our
that.
service
but I mean,
providers
just
know that in cases where it overscores, it's typically intentional.
And you can almost always tell. Because they're like, yeah, they almost like, you can see like, I know how I'm going to answer this before they even, you can kind of tell most of the time when they're, trying to lead you down a certain path, but it does happen. I know that like a lot of people, that don't do VI spedats on a normal basis probably, see a lot of that. So that's just why I want to bring it up.
Yeah, I can tell you no one that we've dealt with so far has been overscored on it. It's been far more underscoring.
100%.
Yeah. And it probably is in Lexington, where you have people that are in the system longer and have been working in the system. It probably is. Most of my VI SPDAT experience comes from, because these are all done by somebody else, whereas in the Big Sandy region, my staff's doing them. So, and it's people who've never had a VI SPDAT.
Right, yeah.
So there's a difference.
Yeah, we have a couple system workers in Lexington. Just one or two.
Any other questions for the Rapid Rehousing Program?
and I'm just going to note for Brita who's taking minutes, this would be their COC rapid rehousing program, because you all do also have ESGCB rapid rehousing.
Right.
I have one quick question. Could you talk a little bit more about what is happening when people are refusing to access the job services? Just briefly.
Yeah, they just like, our case manager will say, it's time limited program, you really need to get a job. We've got this great, way for you to, this program that, will help you every step of the way. And they say, yeah, but then you come to pick them up, you make an appointment for them, you come to pick them up, and they don't answer the word. They dodge it. They will say, so you keep paying their rent, they will say that they will do it. And then, when they've got 6 months to go in the program, their hair's on fire.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
I'm really surprised no one's asked what the community integration supplement is.
What's the community?
Well, do you want to tell us?
I will tell you all, because I know there's people going, what is that? So it's commonly known as the state supplement. So people who have severe mental illness, and because of that severe mental illness, are likely to become institutionalized if they don't have stable housing. They can, and they have to have an established disability, then they can apply for this community integration supplement. Usually, it's someone who already has a Social Security determination, and it will add a little bit onto their not add it onto the Social Security. It's a separate check, but it gives them about $500 extra a month, so that allows them to pay rent and live, because it takes into consideration all of their bills, even cigarettes and entertainment, and then. But you have to have you have to be engaged in services so that a therapist or doctor can write the letter that you're likely to become institutionalized or homeless. So it's hard to get sometimes, but it's not possible. And a lot of the people, especially in PSH, will qualify for it. It's actually a $1,300 supplement. But if you have Social Security, they subtract the amount of Social Security from it.
Has the process gotten any easier for that? I remember back when I was doing direct service and assisting, it was literally an all-day trip to the local SNAP's office.
I don't think you even have to go in person now. I think you can just send it in.
I was hoping that probably changed
I think
COVID.
You just submit it all. And the only thing is, on recertifications especially, they've gotten really picky about this budget thing. So you have to show that you've got all these expenses that will keep you from getting housed, which shouldn't be in the real world hard. It's just sometimes it's hard to get people to admit what they're spending their money on, because even if it's drugs, you should put it on there. They don't discount that, because that's part of your disability. So just a really solid budget showing them in the hole is what they need, and the determination from a doctor.
I'd like to kind of add on that. We have seen probably over the last year and a half, I don't want to say crackdown, but kind of that's what it has been from the state, because New Beginnings, all serious mental illness clients, a lot of our long-term clients were getting their CIS cut off, having to reapply, and it was, well, they've maintained housing for so long, they clearly don't need this extra income, and it has been a bit of a nightmare to get it reinstated.
Imagine extra income doesn't help them stay in housing.
0 cents is made. And even in like a PSH program, it's like, oh, if they're only responsible for this amount of rent, and they get all this extra money, and they have their $30 of SNAP a month, they're fine.
Exactly.
It has become an increasingly difficult process over the last year and a half.
We had that problem with someone in our PSH program in the Big Sandy region his got cut off, and we were trying to reapply for it. It got cut off because they said he didn't need it, he didn't have enough expenses, but he wouldn't talk to people about it because he was like, I don't agree with my diagnosis of schizophrenia.
I think we've even had some that's because, well, it's been so long since they've had a hospitalization, they're not at risk
Yeah,
of
it's like-
institutionalization again. It's like,
Thanks for
because
the
they
great
have
work.
the resources in place to
Exactly.
stay out of the hospital, it's very counterintuitive.
Yeah, it is, but we were finally, I've been able, sometimes serving on like committees like this and statewide committees has its pluses. So when we were seeing all this happen in the Big Sandy region, I called Jason Dunn and was like, what's going on? And he like had the food stamps office call me, and we literally had a standing call for several weeks of where we went through applications and what was wrong with it and what we needed to do to get it reinstated. And they helped me with this particular client because they would, they have to do that phone interview. And he would be like, I don't want your money. I don't need your money. Yes, you do.
Don't say that.
After a couple of months of not having it, he realized, part of his thing is being able to like order things on Amazon, and that kind of keeps him stable, so he can walk around in a purple cape or whatever. And he couldn't do that, so he finally was like, "Oh yeah, I probably do need that money." But it took like the state, the local, everybody, and they finally let us do the attestation of and the interview and left him out of it because it was still going to be, he's going to tell you that he doesn't agree that he's schizophrenic and he doesn't need your money. That's what he's going to tell you because of his mental illness. So,
And then also, he has clients who won't engage with their provider.
Yes.
They're not ill. It's hard to get someone to sign off on extra money if they haven't seen you in 5 years.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Marty had the wrong date on his calendar, so he was unprepared and has requested that we reschedule his presentation.
Okay, request approved. Okay, so this is our time to have any other public comments, or if anybody has things they want to share, this is the time to do it while we have the group here.
I'd like to reiterate some of what Jackie has said of the difficulties of finding housing. As of like 4 hours ago, 2 of our major apartment complexes that New Beginnings has worked with for years has told us they're not accepting vouchers and doubt they will work with any more programs. Modern Property Management is officially absolutely no vouchers.
All of them? Oh no.
Yep, as of 10 a.m. today.
Someone on here that was going to get ready to get housed in probably isn't going to.
Get in it as quick as you can. They have said that there's some, like, we've had a couple landlords, if something is in process, they're saying they will honor that, but come lease renewal time, they won't be accepting vouchers anymore. So it's not only like an issue right now, is so many of our folks, especially that are on a housing choice voucher or some sort of program, whenever it comes time for lease renewal, are in a place where it will no longer be accepted and there's nowhere else for them to go. So we had a big discussion this morning of fear of where everyone is going to be a year or so from now. And places raising
It is
above
the
FMR.
third-party payment programs voucher. It's not FMR.
It's just an absolute refusal to take vouchers anymore. One of our properties, who we have a lot of our PSH people at, and several others have just said, it's too much trouble, or we've had too many other residents here on that sort of funding program, and they've caused too much in damages, and we're not going to do it anymore. So there's
a couple of things. First of all, I Love UCG has recently hired a housing advocate, and one of the things that housing advocate is doing is helping individuals and families in Fayette County navigate various different housing issues. That could be trying to identify affordable housing units, but it could also be things like if they maybe need to be connected with code enforcement for potential assistance with housing repairs. or with the grants program that does housing rehab, so they can kind of navigate a variety of issues. Her name is Caitlin Dixon. She has only been with us for a couple of weeks, but she is very responsive. If you don't have her contact information, you need it, feel free to get in touch with me and I can provide you with her information. I'm going to be meeting with her and Commissioner Lanter soon to be talking about some things. And one of the things I'm going to make sure that they understand is the increase in landlords that are no longer participating, because, you know, when I hear modern property management that used to be kind of a go-to is no longer participating, that's concerning to me. So we need the awareness that it's not just a rental affordable housing issue, but it's also specifically not wanting to participate in programs. The other thing that I'm hearing you say is that landlords are communicating to you that there's an issue with prior damages, for example, and risks that they're taking. I'm just gonna make an ask of my providers that anytime that you're encountering those situations, if you can kind of keep some kind of track and documentation around how often when you solicit a property, whether it's a new or an existing landlord, if you can do any kind of data tracking on your own. I know it's gonna be kind of informal, but if we can do that, just try to do that for me, because as much data as I can get to demonstrate that, that helps me make an argument for looking at new programming that we can try to implement. Again, talking about things like a landlord mitigation program. Maybe a few years ago that wasn't something that we needed, but if it's something that our data demonstrates that we need now, I'm glad to revisit that subject, look for funding sources, advocate for it. But you all that are out there doing the work on the front lines are going to be my best source of information to support that. I have less ability to seek out the funding if it's just my anecdotal evidence. So I just ask that of you.
Any other things that anybody wants to share? Okay, I'll take a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Okay, I'll stand us adjourned. Thank you.